Hello, good morning. Or
We got you.
Hi, Mary.
I'm going to let everybody in, and then I'll give a quick little intro to Andy, and then turn it over to you.
Okay.
What are you eating, Carol?
Kind of like my breakfast. Sorry, I'm going to turn myself off in a few minutes on my video. Figured I'd let you see me. Say, Andy, did you see the commotion over on Arlington and Narbonne? Well, in 241st yesterday?
No, I've been out in the field.
Oh,
I never hear anymore.
well, there was paramedics. There was at least 6 Lomita sheriff's cars. Some crazy lady, I think, hit a car as she was standing in the street wearing all white. She decided to take her top off and then take her bottom off.
Whoa.
And she laid down in the street, and so a couple of cars kind of, blocked her from getting hit. I understand that she might be the same crazy lady that was over on Eshelman last week, putting the cones up, and it made it very difficult from Lomita Boulevard to about 241st Street, 240th Street to drive.
Is she cute, Carol?
I didn't see her. I knew about, I was watching this was during our office meeting yesterday.
Oh, okay. All right.
My son comes in and goes, "Don't go outside. Something's happening outside." Well, said, "Go outside and find out what's happening."
Yeah, we want to know if we're disappointed or not that we missed it.
Yeah.
I don't think so. And then all the people in Lomita just started talking about, yes, I've seen her here. Somebody saw her in Torrance, and it was a big conversation. Lomita people talk to each other on their Facebook page a lot. So anyway,
All right. Well, let's get going here. I just wanted to butt in and introduce Andy. Thank you for doing this Zoom with us, Andy. We go back decades. I remember you coming to my El Camino classes. I don't know if it was 20 or 30 years ago, but it was a long time ago. So we've got a long relationship, and a couple of points I want to make just for the agents that are here today. One of the things we're always pushing now is to make sure when you get a new listing, or just prior to getting that listing, if you know you're going to get it, order that termite report, because I know, Andy's, a lot of times it's taking a week or two to get that inspection, and we want to have that information when those multiple offers come in this crazy market. So here's Andy. It's all yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's kind of busier than I've ever seen it, and we're doing the best we can to keep up. But yeah, that's a good point, because we are a couple of weeks backlog. I'm not doing inspections myself again to try to fill in the gaps where we need to meet deadlines. Kind of like the Minuteman, I guess, to go out and get them done, or take something off somebody else's schedule to get them done in time for end of a contingency period or something like that, where there's deadlines that have to be met. So we're doing the best we can, but yeah, the sooner the better. Kind of try to get us out there a couple of weeks before, or call us a couple of weeks before you actually need the report, if you can do that. Okay, so let's talk about some topics. Let me just kind of give those of you that are not familiar with how my industry works and how we connect with the real estate industry. We're state regulated, just like realtors are, through consumer affairs. In fact, most of the regulations that we have to follow through the state laws were actually created by the real estate industry. Long time ago, before my time, and I've been doing it for 50 years, they decided we were too important to not be regulated, and I think they felt that termite companies were kind of taking advantage of sellers by making recommendations that maybe weren't necessary and charging prices to certify houses. So I think California Association of Realtors stepped in and created the they lobbied to create the Structural Pest Control Board, which is our governing body. And they created rules and regulations for us to follow. And so when you have a termite company come out to do a termite inspection, they're not really giving their opinion. We're giving the opinion of the state of California. We're basically told where to look, what to look for, and when we find it, what to recommend on a termite inspection. Is none of it's our opinion. It's changed quite a bit since the purchase contract changed, because if you've been in the business for 4 or 5 years, you know that the purchase contract used to have a section on wood destroying organisms for the termite inspections. And back then, it was basically the seller would be responsible for whatever termite work was found and recommended on a termite inspection. And since then, that's been removed. So now it's more of a negotiating area. It's always good for a seller to kind of know what to expect if a termite inspection is done. So that's why it's always good to get it ahead of time and be proactive. Many times we're called out by the buyer's agent now, like a home inspection, and we do it before the contingency period's up. So they have information about it. So it kind of shifted from having to do it as a seller to the buyer wanting to know what's wrong with the house, like they do everything, all the other inspections, and then using that information to decide how they want to proceed with the transaction. So things have changed a little bit. And so I think one of the benefits to using a company that's well-known is that if you as a seller have a, representing a seller, have a termite company come out and do an inspection that's well-known, chances are the buyer won't feel the need to get their own guy. They'll probably trust that inspection and not feel like they have to get their own guy involved. Because sometimes when they get their own guy involved, they might call somebody out that's going to pick the place to shreds, just to maybe build up a credit that they might be asking for. So be aware of that. The 2 topics I chose to talk on today, one of them is condominiums. The purchase contract back in the day, when it used to have that section in it, used to basically describe what to include in a termite inspection on a condominium or a townhome. It basically said to include the areas that that individual owner was responsible for, and not to include anything that the association was responsible for. And so you would have to, when you ordered a termite inspection, then on a condominium or townhome, it was important that you found out exactly what the limitations of your seller's responsibility was on that unit. Now it's a little different, because the buyer's calling us out and they want to know everything. They want to know what's in the attic, which very well may be a common area, or what's on the outside of the building, which very well may be association responsibility. So it's a little bit tougher now to know what to order when you're ordering a termite inspection. I guess when you're representing the seller, you'd want it only to include what the seller is responsible for, because you don't really want us to include something that is not their responsibility and it show up on a termite report. And especially if a lender sees it, that might even complicate it even more, for things that are not their responsibility, that are actually association responsibilities. If you're on the buyer's end, of course, you're going to want to know as much as you can, not only about the unit, but also about the complex. Are they preparing to do a special assessment because they're going to have some termite work done? So it's really important from a buyer's point of view that you not only get information from the termite report, but you try to get information about what the association's been up to regarding termite work, because the last thing you want to do is buy into a complex that's planning on having work done, or maybe even a fumigation done, that might ultimately cost you extra money in an assessment. And you'd want to know that up front before the transaction closes. On a seller side, for the same reason, you might want to know what their reserves are and whether or not their reserves have been setting aside money for termite work. Because if they have, then technically you've already been paying into your termite work. You've been contributing to that reserve account while you owned the building. And technically speaking, you've paid the termite bill. And if that reserve is set aside and it's going to be used for that, and there's going to be no special assessment, it seems like it would be unfair to me. It seems to me it would be unfair to expect a seller to pay for termite work when they've already been paying for it through their association, and especially if the association is planning something. So when you're dealing with a condominium or a townhome, from either side, there's a lot of little details that you have to consider, because the bottom line is that where the line is drawn, the property line is drawn, is hard to say. It's not like a single family residence where it's clear where the property line is and everything within it's going to be that owner's responsibility, and That's everything that the buyer is going to be buying when they buy that property. But on a condominium or a townhome, it might be only the living space. It might be the living space in a garage. It might be the balcony. It might also even be the whole structure, aside from maybe the roof. So it's important to know where that line's drawn and tailor your inspection accordingly. Okay, should I ask for questions on that topic? Because I know it's a little complicated, but
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat and I'll interrupt Andy. But just keep going, Andy, and I'll let you know if there's any questions.
okay, all right. The other topic that I wanted to talk about was, and you never hear anybody talk about this, because termite companies are the ones that know this, and they typically would not want anyone else to know it. But I'm going to talk about what to do when you have discovered that the termite company did not do a good job on a house you purchased. So you bought this house, maybe you're doing some remodeling, maybe you just noticed some things wrong with the house, and you find out that these are things that the termite company should have either reported, fixed, or they didn't fix them properly. Or let's say they spot treated termites and the termites, it didn't work, and the termites are pretty bad and needs to be tented. Because we're state regulated, and the Structural Pest Control Board is there not only to make rules and regulations, they're also there to make sure that we follow the rules and regulations. And because there are rules and regulations, if we don't follow them, we can be held accountable. It's not like a home inspector where they kind of create their own rules, and many of them through associations, not the state of California. We have to follow those rules, and we're accountable for everything and anything that may have created damages to someone. So if you buy a house and you discover the termite work was not done properly, you can simply file a complaint with the Structural Pest Control Board. And on every termite report at the very bottom of the first page is going to be instructions on how to contact them. And you simply have to contact them. You can do it online. You can call them, do it by mail, and let them know that you feel that there's something wasn't done right. And the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to want you to get another termite opinion, but you don't necessarily have to. If it's pretty blatant, they wouldn't require it. But if you did get another termite company in and they said, well, they missed this and they didn't do this right, and these things should have been included, they're going to want to see that termite report. And they're going to notify the company that certified the property for you when you bought it, that a complaint's being filed. And they let them know all the details of that complaint. And they ask them to respond to it. And they give them 10 days, and this is all done by certified letter. So, there's no question that the company is notified, that they do know about it. They're given a deadline to respond to it. Typically at that time, the termite company is going to contact you to come back out and inspect it, because they want to see if there's some validity to your complaint. And they're going to want to do that before they have to respond, because if they're blatantly in the wrong, they're probably going to offer to correct it, because if they are blatantly wrong, the Structural Pest Control Board is going to make them fix it anyway. And it's better to be cooperative than because the outcome is going to be the same anyway, and it's going to be a whole lot better for them if they do cooperate, rather than be forced to do this work. So they're going to probably contact you, want to take a look at it. They're going to come and look at it. They might try to negotiate with you to try to do something maybe less than maybe they might be forced to do. So be careful if you go down that road. It's better to let the state of California decide. So if they don't do exactly what the other company recommends or that you feel is necessary, it's better to just let it run its course, because if they don't satisfy your complaint, then that complaint is transferred to a division of investigation. And what this is a team of inspectors that will come out and inspect your home and determine whether or not the job was done properly. These guys are pretty vigilant. They are very thorough. They're going to inspect the house from top to bottom, and they're going to report everything and anything they find. And if they determine that any of those things should have been found or were not done properly, they're going to force that company to do them correctly. They're also going to fine them. It's going to go on their record. No good comes from this. And every termite company knows this, that the last thing you want to do is have an investigator from the state of California come out and inspect the house to determine if you failed to do what you should have done through the Structural Pest Control Board rules and regulations. That's why in many cases, the termite company is going to try to get this problem solved without it going that route. In fact, it may do you well to just tell them that you know how the system works, and you know that you have the right to file a complaint. You know that if you're not satisfied, they're going to send an investigator. If you just let them know that you know how the whole system works, chances are they're going to try to avoid that whole mess and just take care of it. And that way you also don't have to wait for the state. You don't have to go through all that. If they do all this work and you still are suspicious they didn't do it right, you can still file a complaint. You can still have the Structural Pest Control Board come out and make sure they did everything right. So you still have that right. But you may be able to avoid going through that whole process by just letting them know you know the process, and that you have every intention of going through that process if they in fact do not satisfy your complaint. So so that's how you go about it. Good companies are probably going to come out, see they made a mistake, and take care of it. Some companies are going to try to dodge and weave. But for the most part, most termite companies are pretty good about this area, and they don't want any part of the Structural Pest Control Board if they can avoid it. And if the outcome is going to be the same anyway, they're probably going to take care of it right up front and not give you a bad time about it. So, but it's good to know the system, and it's good to know how to go about it in the event they don't cooperate. Anybody have any questions about that?
Don't see any yet coming out, so I guess everybody is intrigued.
Okay, all right. Well, I've done a lot of this, and I try to be thorough. So, I guess no questions is a good sign that I covered the bases. Let's see, one other thing, just in case you don't know about swarming termites. We just had some of the biggest swarms I've ever seen in 50 years. And what they're triggered by is the hot Santa Ana winds. Kind of give you a real quick crash course in drywood termite colonies. Drywood termites are type of termites that live in the wood. The kind that live in the ground are called subterranean termites. Drywood termites are a big problem here in Southern California, and they're the type of termites that you would tent for if they're bad enough. Drywood termites enter a structure or a tree in order to start the recycling process. This is nature's way of recycling dead trees. If it wasn't for termites, there'd be a bunch of dead trees piled up in the forest, and there wouldn't be any room for new trees, and the nutrients from those dead trees would not get back in the soil. So the termites are starting the process of decay of the dead trees in the forest. But they don't care that you took a dead tree, sawed it up into lumber, and built a house out of it. Their job is to recycle. And so that's why they're after your house. When a colony's been in a tree or a house for, let's say, an extended period of time, 8 to 10 years, their job not only is to work on destroying this tree, it also starts to become part of their job to spread the process throughout the forest to other trees that have since died. So they start creating termites in the colony that are designed to leave the colony. And they grow like an outer shell, they grow wings, they grow reproductive organs. There's 50% male, 50% female, and they are getting prepared to leave the colony, to swarm into the air, to search out other places to start new colonies. And they do this in the forest, and they do this in the neighborhoods, because to them, the neighborhood is just a forest full of dead trees. So if you, on a hot Santa Ana wind day in September, October, which we had 3 really big heat waves this last season, you'll usually see termites fluttering all over in the air. And that's what they are. They're leaving a mature colony that has been established for quite some time. They have been developed to go out and search out other trees, in this case houses, because they're dead trees, to start recycling them. And that's how termites get from one house to another. They swarm out of one house that's had termites for a long time, and they swarm into the houses in the neighborhood around them. One point to note is that termites, they like new wood. They don't like old wood. If you have a house that's 60, 70 years old and it's all original, they're not looking for your house. If you've been fumigated, you don't have termites now, it's highly unlikely you'll get reinfested. Chances are they don't even know it's wood anymore because it's so dry and old. But the brand new house going up down the street is being swarmed into. That delicious smell of fresh lumber is attracting all those swarming termites, and they fly into these building sites. They fly into lumber yards all the time. They work slow. So sometimes it takes 5 years before somebody even starts noticing that they have termites. So don't be surprised if you have a client with a newer house expecting it to be free and clear and then getting surprised to find out that it needs tenting. That's usually why. Usually it's because the termites swarmed into it. It was in a framing stage, or somehow the wood was exposed, or they swarmed into the lumber yard where they got their lumber. They built this house, they closed it up, and then the termites were working on the framework until they started making themselves obvious and started coming out into the areas where we would see them, or even the owners would see them. And if it's long enough, they might even get a swarm coming out of that house. On occasion, termites accidentally swarm inside a house from a light socket or a receptacle or some opening in the wall and swarm into a room. And when this happens, they typically wind up in the brightest part of the room, usually windowsills, in front of French doors, underneath skylights, because their job is to go out and fly into the light in search of other trees to infest. So if you ever experience that and wonder what all those flying termites are doing inside your windowsill, it's not that the termites are necessarily even coming from the window. They're heading for the window trying to get out. And in that case, that house needs fumigating. It means that there's been a colony inside that house for 8 to 10 years or more. It's mature, it's probably widespread, and there's no way you're ever going to reach that colony, all of that colony, to kill it through spot treatment. So if you see a swarm inside a house, you know somebody had a swarm inside their house, they need fumigating, and there's almost no exceptions to that.
I think Shireen had a question for you.
Okay. Hi.
We'll click the unmute, Shireen. Unmute, then you can stop.
Okay, now we've done that. Okay, and nice to meet you, Andy. Thank you. You actually did the house that I'm living in right now. My parents had you years and years ago. So
Well,
and I was going to, yeah, Jason Buck had sent us to you when I was getting ready to come back into the area, but I was going to ask about this earlier, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. But no, it is bugging me because I had left residential for several years and came back and had seen that the WPA form is no longer part of the purchase agreement and stuff. So I don't know, maybe Danny or Durf would be better equipped to answer it, but I'm sure that you saw the change having been in the industry for as long as you have been. What prompted that, you guys? Like, I thought they were going to get more protective, and they actually got so much less protective with stuff like that. I know that, like, one person said, oh, we just put it on the repair request, and I get it, and that's what I've done, but I just was surprised that that was removed.
Well, my understanding is it's to actually help the termite companies to get more business. I mean, even though it may have gone both ways, but it's to get the seller to know beforehand. Because when the wood destroying pest was attached to the RPA, you didn't necessarily know what those costs were. And we always recommend when we list a property to get that report done first. That way the seller knows it's there. It doesn't necessarily have to be paid for by the seller, but that way they know the difference between a $2,000 report and a $10,000 report. And it also makes it easier for Andy to get paid after he does the inspection, because they know what the value is there, rather than having the buyer come and get a report from a different company, and then everybody's fighting over what the cost is.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I think that was one of the biggest reasons, is that in spite of the fact the seller was responsible for it, they weren't getting the termite inspections done until after they were in the transaction. And then they agreed to do work that they had no idea what it was going to cost. So I think that was probably what prompted it the most. Now, I knew it was coming. I heard about it a lot. I heard a lot of chat about it and by some of the people that were involved in the change. And it was my understanding that in Northern California, they were kind of ignoring that paragraph and doing it this way anyway. They were using it as a negotiating point. They basically were not using the purchase contract to dictate what was going to happen with the termite. And one of the things that came up was that if a seller agrees to do termite work, doesn't know how much it is, and they accept that offer, they're locked. It's too late. They can't back out. And if it turns out to be so much money that it made that transaction impractical for them, it was still too late. Whereas the buyer has this contingency period. They can decide things. They have time before they can really lock themselves into the transaction. So taking it out of there gave both sides an opportunity to back out of the transaction. With the buyer, with the contingency period, they could back out of the transaction if they found too many things were wrong with the house. But then if they go and they put in a request for repairs to the seller, saying, I expect you to do this $10,000 worth of repairs, the seller has the option to say no, letting them out of the transaction, or at least letting them out of it in the event that that buyer expected them or it was going to force them to pay it. They had an out by refusing to agree to the request for repairs. So both sides, once this fee, this amount of money was discovered, both had options still, and it could still stay negotiable. I think that was really the main reason. They didn't want sellers getting locked into something without knowing what they were getting into, with no chance to get out of it. There was some talk about the lenders. If it's in the purchase contract, it becomes part of the escrow. They couldn't keep it out. Like, say, a home inspector, you have a home inspection done, and they find some things wrong with the house, and the buyer and seller can negotiate it without the lender getting involved. And that's not necessarily a good reason, because in reality, the lender becomes part of the ownership of that house. So they really shouldn't be left out of that loop. But sometimes the lenders got kind of crazy about what they were going to require as conditions to fund a loan. So I think there was another kind of underlining reason, so they could have a transaction and not have the lender intervene in something maybe the buyer and seller really wanted out of the transaction. I mean, let's face it, if a guy was going to go in and remodel the whole house and they were going to tear the bathroom out, but it had a leaking stall shower, it's going to cost $2,500 to fix, the lender was going to make them fix it, even though they're going to tear the bathroom out. There were a lot of little things like that. Sometimes, not so much now, but it seemed like for a while there, some of these lenders were nuts. I saw a situation where the buyer did a little shopping and he got like 3 different termite reports, and he chose us and we did the work. But the lender had the other reports and forced them to pay the other guys to do things that wasn't on our report. They made that poor seller pay for every recommendation on every report. I had one where we had an inaccessible garage. God, that was crazy too. They held up the loan because we never went back to check the garage, but the property was certified. But somebody decided we need to check that garage. But typically that doesn't stop a transaction from closing, because it doesn't interfere with us certifying the property free and clear. But a lot of things were happening like that, and I think the lenders were getting to the point where they just wanted to leave them out of some of the transaction. But again, that wasn't really the correct reason.
Well, no, but it was deal killer though. And that's the thing, like you said, because in the original RPA, because it was referenced in that, it had to be included. And so you're totally speaking my language, like you're obviously an OG too. Because I remember, like, that's why we'd never put, like, if we were getting because I was in Northern California. That's why I was like, okay, you're just speaking my language, but we would never put that we were getting a well test done, a septic and all that, because then the lender, of course, was going to ask for a copy of it. But we were handcuffed to that WPA because it was referenced in the contract. So I'm glad that it benefited the pest guys. I just know that it was a deal killer. What I learned here today is I thought that the termites liked the old houses, because for the 15 years that I was gone, I was doing real estate in Woodland, which is like every single house had an infestation, and they would always be like, well, it's Woodland, but they were all turn-up-the-century houses. So I'm surprised, but it was also, just demographically, not a lot of house care happening there, but I didn't know that they liked chewier new wood. I didn't know that. But,
new wood is much more nutritious. It's full of moisture. As it gets older and drier, it loses a lot of that.
That's so cute, though.
I don't want to get too far off the subject, but when you do termite repair work, it's amazing the difference in the termites when you're removing old wood as opposed to new wood. When you see the termites in old wood, they're small and skinny and scrawny because there's so little nutrition, so little moisture. When you get termites out of a 5-year-old house, man, they are big juicy suckers, and it's because there's so much nutrition there.
Ah,
And remember, they're supposed to recycle dead trees, not 80 years later. They're supposed to hit that tree as soon as it dies and get that process started. So they're designed to be attracted to a tree that just died, not one that's been laying around for a long time. So, you know,
well, yeah, not decomposed. It makes sense. Like a worm would probably want a newer body than
exactly, yeah. Don't wanna dried up old body, yeah.
Well, thank you. That's so cute. I never really thought about it, but I guess termites are cute little vegans, so that's cool.
I wanted to add one other thing about the change in the purchase contract, what it created. Before it changed, it was seller's choice, seller's choice, seller's choice. Very few realtors would want to write in their choice of termite company into an offer because they might reject that offer for one that didn't put their termite company in. You know, you didn't want to rock that boat. You want your offer accepted. So why put stuff in it that might cause the seller or that agent to say, nah, we're going to choose a termite company. So it was seller's choice, seller's choice, seller's choice. So it created a whole subculture of termite companies that were catering to top producing listing agents. Termite companies that were cutting corners, patching dry rot, treating termite houses that are full of termites that should have been fumigated. And they were getting a lot of business because they were known to be seller friendly. Well, that disappeared, and it was good for everybody because those companies were making it difficult for companies that were doing a good job to survive. They were getting all the work. And then, heck, those guys, 5 years later, they might be out of business because they got caught. They were doing so much free work, but it was too late. We still didn't get the job. The buyer still had a house full of termites, you know? So it was really a disservice for that to be happening. And I think that this change now created a very even playing field, because even a listing agent, they're unlikely to get the cheapest guy out there because they know probably the selling agent knows they're the cheapest guy out there, knows that they cut corners, knows that they can't be trusted to do a good job for their buyer, and they're going to get their own guy out anyway. And they're going to fill out the request for repairs for their guy, not the cheap guy. So it's not going to do them any good to seek out that substandard company anymore. You know, we had realtors that I knew well because I've been involved in the real estate industry so long. I mean, sat side by side with them on committees, putting on trade shows that never ever called in an inspection to my company ever. And then when the purchase contract changed, and I knew these people well, when the purchase contract changed, they ordered a termite inspection from us, and I met them on the property and kind of smiled and said, "What am I doing here?" And I was told directly that, well, if I use you, at least I keep control, because chances are the buyer's agent's not going to feel the need to get his own guy. So at least I get a fair, honest inspection. You know, you couldn't get that cutting corner inspection anymore, but at least, I mean, maybe the buyer might get Orkin or Terminix out there with some guy with a big commission on the line and pick the place to shreds. You know, so that's why even the listing agents that never used us before started using us, because we were that neutral party, that company that kind of buyers and sellers agents both trusted. So it did my company a ton of good. And I think all the good companies, it did us a ton of good. The bad ones, not so much, and that's okay with me.
Oh yeah, you must have been a fly on the wall in a few hundred houses when I was up north. The stuff that you're describing has all happened. So that's crazy. So, all right. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm glad I asked because that was super informative.
Yeah, it's good topics, good conversation.
I'm totally fascinated by the termite now. Like I'm into him because when you say nutritious, it's so cute. Like I want to feed him. I feel bad now, but not here, somewhere else.
They're good guys. They're just not welcome in the homes.
I know. I kind of feel like they're misunderstood, but anyway. Okay. Thank you very much.
So Andy, do you want to hit on the certifications and how you guarantee your work and stuff? That way everybody kind of knows.
Yeah, well, because we're state regulated, those certifications are actually provided for us. A certification is basically a statement that the property is free and clear of wood destroying organisms. And there's basically 3 of them in the Business and Professions Code of the state of California. One of basically is used when it's a clear report, when we don't find any termites or dry rot or damage. And it says this property, whoops, sorry about that. This property is free and clear of infestation or infection of wood-destroying organisms in the visible and accessible areas. The second one is used if you find something wrong and you fixed it. You treated it, you fumigated it, you repaired it, and on the completion notice, it's going to say the property is now free and clear of wood-destroying organisms in the visible accessible areas. The third one is if you do some of the work but not all of the work, it's going to say this property is free and clear except as follows. And it's used when you do a partial job and not the whole job. Those three certifications are provided by the state of California, and we have to use them if asked, if the house qualifies. So if you have a house that qualifies for that and you ask for a certification, we don't have a choice. We have to put that statement in there. And that also was created by the I'm sure the California Association of Realtors lobbied to make that part of our regulations because they didn't want termite companies trying to hold back on that if maybe you did the work yourself, or you were handy, or you hired your own contractor to do it. And once you prove that, we would have to certify it. Just because we didn't do the work didn't mean we didn't still have to certify it. There are two other certifications, an FHA and a VA, which are much more strict. They require every single recommendation on the report to be completed, where the California one only requires section 1s. Section 1s meaning recommendations that involve an active infestation, any damage caused by that infestation, and any condition that was the result of that infestation resulted in. So if you have a shower pan leaking that caused dry rot and caused fungus that caused the dry rot, that all becomes a section 1. That all has to be done to get certification. But if you have a leaking stall shower that just leaks, has no sign of any dry rot or fungus, that's a section 2 because it's a preventative measure. We don't care if shower leaks. We just care the shower leaking might lead to a wood destroying organism. So that would be something we could certify. The garage, inaccessible areas like a garage full of storage. We haven't found any termites, so we can certify that property because remember, the certification is saying that it's free and clear of wood destroying organisms in the visible and accessible areas. So that's what certifications are. It's a statement, and when a house qualifies, when asked, we have to provide it.
What about for condo complexes where it may be handled by a different company?
Say that again, Danny.
For condos, I know sometimes they need that certification where you just go out and inspect the interior since the owner doesn't really mess with usually patios or eaves or anything like that.
Well, when you do an inspection and you limit it to a certain area, let's say it's a condominium and you only check the interior because that's the only part that the seller is responsible for. You can certify that interior. You can give full certification on that interior. Now, if you find termites somewhere in a condominium and it's say a larger building, there's no chance they're going to fumigate this building and you have to spot treat it, you do that as what they call a secondary substandard measure, and you can certify that treatment, but you're going to have to say that your primary recommendation was to fumigate the building. And that's almost always acceptable. I don't know if I've ever seen a lender or anybody not accept that because there really isn't any other choice. You do the best you can to treat it. You can't fumigate it because it's connected to 99 other units. So certification on condominiums and townhomes are not any different, except you have to understand that you're only certifying what you inspect. So if you only inspect the interior, you're only certifying the interior. You check the garage in the interior, the balcony, you're only certifying those areas. You're not certifying that the whole building is free and clear. So certifications on condominiums and townhomes are pretty straightforward.
I'm selling right now condominium. I'm in escrow. Funny enough, I understand everything you say, but I try to make understand the buyer agent. She's requesting the exterior of the building, and I kept on telling her just what you said. The exterior is the HOA, it's not the seller's obligation, but she keeps on practically coming back to that. What can I do about that when I already even give her the HOA information and the HOA documents specifically says in there that that's HOA. I'm a little frustrated with her right now.
Yeah, well, one thing, if you ever have a termite company inspect any part of a condominium or a townhome that is association responsibility, name them as the owner. Don't have your seller's name on that report. They do not own the outside of that building. So on the ownership, the owner, it's going to say whatever, Village Palace Vertus HOA, or Torrance Windermere HOA. That's the owner, not your seller, to try to isolate them from appearing to be responsible for it. So that's one thing. If you're going to check any common areas, it doesn't belong to your seller. It belongs to the HOA. This is more of a technicality. The other thing is that you have to be strong in that your seller not only isn't responsible for it, they actually have no right to repair it. Maybe the association might give them permission to repair it, but they can't just go tearing into association responsibility. It's not even their right to. So but I could see where sometimes buyers want information. They want information. Is there a dry rot on the outside of this unit? Well, if there is, the association's the one you got to notify, not the seller. That's probably the best I could do. But the ownership part of it would certainly help with a lender, because that doesn't have to go anywhere. It's just information, because it's not part of the sale. They're not buying that. They're buying what your seller owns, and that's it. What I said earlier.
Carol had a
Yeah.
question for you too.
Okay.
Thank you.
You there, Carol?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Andy, my complex just got tented, and the tent itself stained my friend's steps really badly. It almost looks like a rust stain. And I called them, and they said, well, I can't guarantee, and it's nothing, it happens sometimes. And I thought, really? You got to come back here and do something. So they sent me to get some industrial cleaner, which I got. I can't remember the name of it. And I poured it out and I scrubbed it, and then I watered it down. It's not doing anything. So do you have any suggestions?
Well, it's probably a glue stain. When you go up steps or any vertical surfaces, the tarp, you can't lay a sandbag on it to hold it down. So they usually use a glue and they spray it on. When we do a complex, we usually warn them up front. There's going to be a stain here. There's going to be a stain there. And a lot of times they go up steps and they tape and glue it to the steps. The rust part of it kind of confused me, because usually the stain's going to be more yellow. It's because it's a spray glue. Because I'm just wondering if something metal was, sometimes we have clips and maybe it got wet and it rusted. But usually we use acetone, and we clean a lot of that. When we do a complex to start with, we try to make them as aware as we can. But there's always things later that come up, and we kind of plan on having to go back there and do some cleanup. So I know I've cleaned out a lot of glue stains off of steps from complexes that we did. I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't come and do it. It wasn't us, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I would have called you directly.
Well, most fumigations are done by a subcontractor. I don't know if this one was, but 90% of fumigations are done by a subcontractor. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. You might be calling the person that actually was hired and paid, but they're not actually the guy that did the fume.
Yeah, and I don't really, I wasn't in direct contact with them, although I'm familiar with the company, because I've seen them. They've been on either complexes before, or I'm familiar with them. They're a South Bay termite company. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name them.
I'm disappointed it didn't come back and clean up your glue stain, but
right. Now that you're telling me this, now I'm wondering, should I go out and get some acetone?
Well, that's what we use. We use acetone. It works really good, especially on concrete.
Wow. Okay. Well, then maybe I'll go. I can just get that at Home Depot or Lowe's or something.
Yeah, and maybe get a real stiff brush.
Yeah, I had a pretty brush.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
No fire.
Well, I'd give that a try. That's what we use, and if that's what it is. But the color sounds a little off, but we get those glue stains all the time on steps, and it's really because if you can't sandbag it down, you got to hold that tarp in place somehow. We just try to warn everybody about it up front, so they expect it.
If I try some nail polish remover in a spot, can I test it that way?
That's acetone. Yep,
Okay.
if fingernail polish remover works, then go buy a little can of acetone, should get it
Got it.
out. Okay,
Thank
good
you.
luck with that. Okay,
All right, well,
All
I
right.
haven't seen any other questions come through yet, so.
okay, all right. Well, we got
Anything
we
else you
talked
wanna
for a
hit
while. I felt good about it. Seemed like we had a nice conversation.
Yep,
So-
and let's see, the easiest to contact Andy is just the info@andystermite.com. His number is the 310-534-2700. And that way you guys can call to schedule any inspections. This is a preferred vendor too on our website and our emails out there, so you guys should have his contact information. If you need business cards, they're here in the office as well. But thanks, Andy, for doing the lunch
Okay.
run for us.
I miss you guys.
Or Dave, are you only serving the South Bay or are you going to Orange?
We will dip into Orange County, but really close to the 605 freeway. It's not that we don't want to, it's just the travel time kills us. You know, to do an inspection out in Orange County, we could do 3 of them here. And it just it limits our volume so much. And then if we do work out there, we have to charge more because that driving time is expensive. You know, if you
The
think
best
about
is
it.
to call the office, because I had one out in Hawaiian Gardens and they actually referred somebody that did that area. That way
Yeah,
you get somebody that they know also.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Referral for Laguna, so.
and we go up to Santa Monica on the west side. You know, we kind of follow the 405 all the way to the 605 from say the 10 down the 405 over to the 605. That's kind of our territory.
Yeah. Okay, so Daniel called you for a referral for Laguna Niguel?
Yeah, they'll give you a company name that covers that area.
That would
Yeah.
be great. Well, thank you, Danny.
You're welcome. All right.
All right, thank you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.